Today we have Jacinda Townsend speaking about her recent book, Trigger Warning. Jacinda is the author of Mother Country, the 2022 winner of the Ernest Gaines Award for Literary Excellence, and Saint Monkey, winner of the 2015 Janet Heidinger Kafka Prize for Best Fiction Written by a Woman, and the James Fenimore Cooper Prize for that year's Best Historical Fiction. This evening, Jacinda will be in conversation with Michelle Yang, who is an advocate whose writing on the intersection of Asian American identity, body image, and mental health have been published in NBC News, CNN, InStyle, and Reader's Digest. Michelle has also been featured on NPR, Washington Post, and the Seattle Times for her advocacy. Phoenix Girl, How a Fat Asian with Bipolar Found Love from Fifth Avenue Press is her debut memoir. Please help me in giving a round of applause for Jacinda and Michelle.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm so honored to be in I'm so honored to be in conversation with Jacinda.
Same.
I've been in awe of her since reading Mother Country, her second novel, and then now I got to read an arc of it, an advanced reader copy, so I was very excited. So I'm so excited to have Jacinda in town for this event. And I guess just to start us off, can you tell us how this novel came to be and, what it's about?
Yeah. And I feel like in some way our books are very different. We're writing from the same well about just how you overcome, And so what's kind of funny is and I know some of you will be able to relate. I started this book because I left the Midwest and moved to California and couldn't stop crying. And it was, there was some grief, and it was the first time I had known this grief because it was like we lost our people, but we also lost our notion of the future. I didn't know where my kids would go to school or where I would teach them how to drive. So I started writing it, and then about a year into me thinking about grief and what the trajectory of grief is, I wrote an article for Al Jazeera about families who had survived having a family member killed by the police. And Tamir Rice's mother told me that the child who had witnessed it, that she was 14 at the time, she didn't eat for a long time after that. They were very worried about her. All the four kids in the family, they'd been doing really well in school. They just all kind of fell off, And I talked to a few other, surviving family members, and it occurred to me that when someone is killed, we think of that person. We think of Philando Castile being like a treasure to his community, the way he supported the children at his school. But we don't think about the 4-year-old who witnessed that whole thing. We don't think about her mother who, endured like a horrific thing right afterwards. So I wanted to write about that, about how that trauma ripples out towards family and community. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I was so grateful reading this book, and I was so grateful that you have written this book, and I hope so many people read it. I thought it was a gift to be able to sit with the grief of it and really ponder, right? Because we hear all these horrible stories on the news, watch all these horrible things happen, and the trauma kind of like rolls over us as witnesses. Mm-hmm. And you spent over 300 pages meditating on what it might be like to be a family member. And it was really, truly healing to be able to occupy that space and imagine what it would be like and all the consequences and repercussions of it. So it was really touching. Yeah.
Thank you. And I mean, the same, like this Phoenix Girl is so powerful if you haven't read it. But one thing is
you don't have to do that.
No,
this is
no,
for you.
But I want to say it's similar in that I think, one thing you think about when you think about like grief, trauma, and mental illness is that it's the kind of thing that the conventional thinking is that how does this trajectory end well? You know what I mean? And that we can write fiction in which it completely does. We can write a memoir in which it completely does. Like, that was important to me.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, for people in the audience who haven't read the book yet, would you mind reading a couple of excerpts or one,
Absolutely.
whatever you want to read from the
Yeah.
book?
And the book is also funny, but I'm gonna start a little heavy. So if you have your book, and if you have your book, and you're sitting next to someone who doesn't, maybe you can sort of share with them. But if you look after the copyright page, there's a list of names, and if you could just pick one, and some of you will recognize some of the names. And just when you pick one, go ahead and say it out loud. I'll pick Mary Turner.
Elijah McClain.
So I dedicated the book to them, and this list could be so much longer. This list has gotten longer even since this book came out. So I'm going to read to you the kind of the scene that starts the whole thing. This is the inciting incident. Sorry. By the time it had been 6 hours since the police officer had shot her father 4 times, and the short pop, 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 nimble as a scarecrow, was on instant replay in her mind. She'd been lying outside in the grass watching the sky for low-altitude flights from San Francisco, and when she heard the report of the gun, she flopped wildly over to her stomach, thinking the shots were coming from across the privacy fence from Mrs. Cortopassy's cactus garden. The moment in which she hesitated, the moment it took her to figure out the shots were coming from somewhere within her very own house, was the moment her mind began learning to revise itself. Should she cower out of sight, she wondered, should she save herself? And then she thought of her father, her one living parent, and in the next second she was running, screaming, "Dad, Dad, Dad," because she already knew, and for a long time she'd think she knew because she held her father just that closely in her consciousness. But years later, in college, she'd take Psychology 4 and learn about distant sensory perception. And she'd wonder if she'd heard, on the wind, a disturbance of sound wave as her boyfriend Bob scaled the fence to get to her bedroom, and her father argued with him, and a neighbor saw this entire sequence of events and called the police. Had she smelled on the air the fine, microscopic particles of gunpowder as the sheriff took his high-range rifle, got out of his cop car, and aimed at the darker man's chest? By the time she ran through the back door, through the kitchen, through the living room, and out the front door, her father was stooped in the driveway. He wore his favorite shirt, the white one with intersecting purple, green, and gray stripes, the shirt she liked to think of as graphing paper. And she could see the circles of blood breaking more and more of the 90-degree angles the stripes made, spreading across his shoulder like the sample stain in a whisk commercial. From behind him, she could see the policeman still pointing his gun at her father. She could see Bob standing with his hands straight up in the air, his multiracial skin turned through the shadows of leaves to its more African undertones, his hazel eyes turned in the remaining sunshine, a queasy iron, tears easing out of them. From behind, she saw her father's arm bent at the elbow where he was clutching some part of his own interior, and she saw the defeated sag in the legs of the brown pants he'd worn the day he spoke to her 6th grade class about accounting as a career, and the day he told her and Wendy to go outside and rake the leaves in the front yard or else, and the day he picked Russell up from his 16th and last day at Riley Children's Hospital. She saw her father again in this realm. She heard his head smack against the black top of the driveway he just resealed with Henry's. She saw the blood fly out of his mouth. Little droplets of her father's heart turned to beads of airborne liquid.
Thank you.
Such a pick-me-up, yes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pulled the audience to the dedication page, because I opened the book and that immediately gave me chills and, immediately, of course, made me want to read the book. Of course, we know, but I wanted to ask you more pointedly about the broader political mission of you writing this novel. I know you were very thoughtful about it, so if you could expand on it.
Sure. So what does justice look like, right? What does justice look like when you have impacted not only a person but a family, and in some ways a community? And I got to tell you too, there was a family. Marshall Miles' sister said that during the trial for the cop who shot him, the police would like kind of cruise around their neighborhood and park in front of their house for a while, and so there was this state-sponsored terrorism, really, of a whole community, right? What does justice look like? Whatever it looks like is not what is happening now, and it's more than just one person going on trial, right? It is that this systematically stops, and so I think like, if I had a larger political aim, it is that people understand that this is not about one killing. This is never about one individual case. That there's a backstory for this police officer who shoots her father, and there's a lot of stuff to this guy, right? And that's, so when we think about justice, it's like, how do we make this systematically stop? How do we go way back to training and hiring and never let this happen again? So I think that's a larger aim, that it sort of catalyzes that thought.
Absolutely. Thank you. On a lighter note, I guess, this is a road trip book as well, which is, when you said earlier that it's a funny book, it is a funny book as well.
Yes.
It's funny. And Ruth, the main character, drives a Tesla across the country. And I was wondering if it was always a Tesla, if it was before Elon Musk went to the White House.
This is such a good question, and it's so wild the way this cover happened. This cover happened way before the election even, and then when all this stuff came out about Elon Musk, we were like, yes, right? But it originally was a Volvo, because I'm totally team Volvo.
Okay.
But I rented a Tesla to go. We drove through Canada. And we couldn't believe how often we had to stop and charge it. But the thing was, every time we stopped and charged, I was like, what are those people doing in that car? So this is in some ways an ode to Tesla charging station culture as well.
And it makes you meander.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
like where are they going?
Yes.
They're kind of going
Yes.
all over to find
Yes.
these supercharger stations. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not too much of a spoiler to say they pick up a hitchhiker at a charging station. There's a guy who's freebasing cocaine in the Tesla next to them. There's a lot that happens. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So sorry, I'm like, you chose the Tesla after Elon?
So the
cover, or no, before, and then
before,
Elon
but
became what he became.
Yeah, absolutely. And the title, I had to fight. This is the one time in my career I've been a complete diva, and Korean knows, because I called Korean sobbing, actually. They wanted the title to be something else, and I kind of threw a little fit. But now I think even that is very charged,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So the passage you read, it's through, happens to she was 16 at the time, right? Ruth is the main character. Mm-hmm. And I have a very clear memory of in high school in AP English, reading Charles Dickens and studying the names and like Mrs. Havisham and how apt that name is. And we had to like dissect the names. And I feel like we could do that with your characters. And I could like picture a class doing that. And Ruth I felt like she couldn't be any other name. And I wanted to hear more about that from you. Like, was she always Ruth from the beginning?
She
Yeah.
was. She was always a Ruth, and I had some kind of high flown like theological aims with that kind of went away as she changed. Myron used to be James, but that was too close to someone I know, so I changed that. And I also felt that Myron, as a Myron instead of a James, is a little more sympathetic because if you have to go through life with that name, Myron, I think that makes you a little more special, right? So
I like the name Myron.
Yes,
yeah,
I
but
like
he was
it.
a likable character,
Yeah.
and Ruth was so mean about him. Like so the ruthless. Like when of course they're going through divorce. So when are you going to be ruthless? But,
Right,
in a divorce.
right.
But sometimes like there was a description that I highlighted in here. What she says about him crying, and I'm like, oh God, that's so mean, and
Yeah.
and then he says he'd fight Ruth ruthlessly.
Yes.
And that kind of leads me into the next question is that every few pages, I would encounter a sentence that you wrote that just would just stop me in the tracks. And I couldn't underline them all because I'd be like underlining. I couldn't find the ones that I wanted. I'll read an example of one. And this is, every time Ruth looked at him across the crowded room, she felt a river run through her. And I don't know, in the context of the page, there was just so many of these beautifully crafted sentences that just really stood out on the page. And I was wondering, do you know, as a fellow writer, do you know when you're writing one of these sentences?
I wish. We went to a concert one time where this guy he was playing piano, and every time he played something great, he would get up and go. Yeah, I don't do that. I kind of bounce it off other people and let them tell me the line is good. But I do work really. Language is I as a reader am a language person, almost more than plot and character even. So I feel like that's why I work really hard at it because it's the thing that always makes me stay with the book. Yeah.
No, it's great. You're, as all the awards show, an amazing writer. And no wonder, you teaching writing. They're lucky to be learning from you.
Oh, you're sweet.
The relationships and love that is woven throughout the book is they're so complex and so authentic. And even though they're all these are not ordinary things that happen in the book, not everything is, but you make them feel so real. And can you, I don't know if this is an easy answer you can give, but tell us a little more about how did you make these characters and relationships so true to life?
Sure. So, and I was going to read you a little bit of Myron's saddest probably moment in that dating, that speed dating. Anyway, but I'll answer the question while I'm flipping. I tend to sort of think that by the end of the book, I want to hurt as many people as I can. So I set about doing that by kind of making them all rather quirky, and so I'll do character sketches. Even when I'm way into the novel, I'll just keep sketching and I'll think about what's the weirdest detail I can offer this person, and then to have those details kind of interact with each other. And I will read a little bit of I'll read a little bit of Ruth actually because I feel like Myron is in some ways my favorite character, but I'll read about
all the characters are really lovable. I have to say,
and they're all sort of going through reinvention because the teenager she's trying to decide whether she's transitioning. Some days she is, some days she is, or they aren't. Some days there is she, some days there are they. But the adults are also as we all do in midlife, they're trying to reinvent themselves. They're trying to figure out what's on the other end of their 40s and 50s, and it's often not pretty. But here's a passage from and the other thing is, and I know a lot of people in this room can relate. So Ruth is going through midlife crisis at the same time her teenager is going through teenage crisis, and they have a really hard time on the road. Ahead of them, the robin's egg blue of the sky blended into an upper layer of icy clouds. Behind her, in the back seat, the hitchhiker picked his yellow fingernails. Beside her, Enix typed into their glowing phone, curating their digital life. Ruth had watched them, over the course of the trip, capture a dozen selfies a day. They'd held actual tumbleweeds up with one hand while skillfully shooting themselves with the other. They'd taken shots of themselves in profile, looking away toward distant mountains. There were photos they'd taken of themselves in front of rusty pickup trucks and kitschy restaurant signs. At a truck stop, Enix had begged Ruth to buy them a $60 cowboy hat for photographic purposes. Money doesn't grow on trees, Ruth had told them before handing over 320s. It does, Enix said. I've seen footage. They topped themselves off with the hat and snapped a photo of themselves wearing it next to Freddy's Steakhouse's neon cowboy boot. While the hitchhiker disembarked and went out to seek smokes, they stayed parked there at Freddy's, where Ruth asked Enix to split a curbside order of snakebite poutine, only to have them refuse. Mom, gross, they said. Okay, how about let's take an Ussie in front of the boot? Stop trying to be cool, they said. You're never funny. No matter how many people are in the photo, it's still called a selfie. Enix's notifications poured out in a vibrating rush every morning at 6:30 when they'd set the phone to wake, and over the continental breakfast tables of their various chain hotels, they set anew each morning, trying to stand astride their social life, reconnecting with the version of Enix Hurley they were trying to build on Instagram. With hearts and emojis, they puttied the void of their absence. Ruth's phone was less friendly, more informational. She'd been reminded via form text of Enix's orthodontist appointment, the one they'd miss in exactly 18 hours. She'd been notified, too, that she was still paying for it. The $40 had been removed from her and Myron's joint bank account, and the debit had gone through as an email that came to her as a beep. Leaving in adulthood involved so much logistical upset. Where would they be living next month? How would she finish straightening her kids' teeth? What was Enix learning from all this? 20 years from now, would they still talk about it in therapy? I'm going to grow up and be just like you, Enix said suddenly, as if reading her mind. Run away from home, join the circus, get a sleeve of tattoos inked on my arm. Tattoos, plural, the hitchhiker said. You can get a tattoo of your mom's broken heart. That can be your first. But Enix had a point, Ruth thought. She wasn't, not now, serving up an example of good life choices. It was possible, in fact, that she never had.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like very real. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the earlier part of the book. This part when you had earlier said your goal is to piss off as many people as possible. And like this part, I was like, what? I was outraged on behalf of Ruth because she had kept the pair of jeans that she was wearing when her father was killed, and they were splattered with blood, and she wore those jeans through college, and I don't know if it's too much of a spoiler, but to say like she doesn't really carry her past into the future. So other than her best friend Clarice, so this pair of jeans were the only pair of jeans, or only part of her past that she was carrying forth, and she never washed them, and it just kind of like one line said, former lover threw them out, like
Yes.
thought that it took him to the Goodwill. And I was just like, what?
Yes.
And I was like, who's this ex-lover? Like, who is it? And it was not very much detail. And I kept waiting for it to come back because it seemed like it would have a lot of significance, but I never, yeah.
It wasn't
it's really-
Myron. It was.
It
not.
wasn't Myron.
No,
Okay,
it wasn't
good.
Myron. So.
I would not have forgiven Myron.
They have a lot, and it's not too much of a spoiler
Yeah.
to say. When the book opens up, she has filed for divorce, and she has filed to get her maiden name back. And he's like, whose name is this? And she's like, oh, it's really my name. And so part of the novel is about her going back to the past. When she kidnaps this child and takes this road trip, she's actually going back to California, right? Where she left that life completely behind for over 2 decades, and she changed her name. She made up a family history for herself. He's having to rediscover her in this new way, and I don't know if this came across, but my intent was that he's not completely blameless, and that he's a little bit complicit in that,
Yeah.
because he kind of wanted not to know her that well,
Right.
you know, for the entirety of their marriage. So I think I'm a little ashamed that Myron's my favorite character. because he is a little complicit,
He's
but
just like a little
he's so
out of it.
sympathetic. He's very sympathetic.
He didn't see it coming, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
he's very sympathetic.
yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you for telling me it's not Myron. All right. So another very significant part of the book that will haunt me, but is very important, and I don't think we hold enough space for, is all of those in the BIPOC community who died of COVID.
Yes.
And as soon as the pandemic was deemed over, I work in marketing as my day job. We had to remove all photos of people wearing masks from all our marketing materials and things like that. And I just felt like we as a nation was trying to forget as quickly as possible this part of our reality that we are ashamed of. You portrayed this, and it didn't even take up a lot of the book, but it had such a powerful impact on me in portraying the impact of COVID and the ineffectiveness of the injustice of the criminal justice system. Just wanted you to share more from you
Sure,
about
yeah.
those characters.
Sure.
Yeah.
And originally there was a lot more pandemic in it. I was advised that people weren't quite ready to read about
See?
the pandemic.
Yeah. Or what, ready to already, still want to be in the dark
Yes.
about it.
Yeah. And so I took a lot of it out, but there's a lot of language, and the passage I'll read at the end, or I can read it now actually. But there's an allusion to the fact that the world has changed just irrevocably because of the pandemic. So I'll go ahead and read this part. And how many of you have read Goodnight Moon? Yeah. And so you know how you get it for your kids.
This is really good.
Right, right? And yeah, you've read it 400,000 times.
No. I mean, this part of your book is really good. I really
thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll just go ahead and read it. Myron sat slumped in his chair, watching Trevor Noah, yet terrifically aware of his own wandering thoughts. Enix had come back taller, not physically, but emotionally. His only child had taken their first day back with him and dashed it against the rocks of a school dance. With Enix gone, he kept reliving the words to Goodnight Moon. Good night, room, he thought. Good night, moon. Good night, cow, jumping over the moon. They were away at the dance with their friend Hannah, no doubt gathered with 2 or 3 friends in front of a large plastic punch bowl, all of them looking no doubt for Kevin, of whom Myron had heard tell while spying on Enix's TikTok. Kevin always got his face too close to his cell phone and looked into its camera eye as if he were a pirate, and Myron hated him without knowing much else about him. He imagined this Kevin under mylar balloons and streamers, looking for Enix, shooting his piratey gaze across the gymnasium. Good night clocks and good night socks. His wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, was gone out west, following some crazy trail to her past. Enix had texted him from places with names like Ogallala and Winnemucca, places whose names he felt might properly be the province of absurdist literature. But then that's what they were now living in the wreckage of the pandemic, in the time of Ruth's disappearance. Enix had told him Ruth's whole backstory, the one Ruth had managed to keep from him over the course of 3 decades in the bump of a new millennium. There was no Hollywood Supper Club fire, no farm in Metcalfe County. Ruth's baby brother had died of a mysterious childhood disease, Enix told him, and her mother had then died of actual heartbreak. Her father, crucified by the local police, shot by his own neighbor. Of all the details she'd fabricated about her past, the lie that her father had been a custodian at the local community college now seemed especially inventive. Mom just built herself out of thin air, Enix had explained, and he'd been surprised to find not anger, but tenderness. Good night, little mouse, and good night, house. And now the world was full of microplastics and artificial intelligence, the humans having decided not only that they no longer wanted to live, but perhaps had never enjoyed being human in the first place. The humans had never quite fallen in love with themselves, Myron thought, and were now collectively shutting themselves down. Good night, nobody. Good night, mush.
Thank you. All right, I think we have a little more time. I just want to ask this: what was the hardest part about writing this book, and then what was the most joyful part?
Oh gosh, one kind of just technically hard part was the road trip itself, because it's a trip, and the town in California is a fictional town, but it's near Sacramento, because that was easy. So the hardest part of writing it was I had a map, I had a timeline, but then my editors were like, you can't possibly pick up a hitchhiker, go to 3 restaurants, go to a hotel, and then be in Utah from Arkansas the following day. So there was a lot of actual work that went into the road trip, and they also made me do a soundtrack for the road trip. So that was fun, because I got to pick like Melanie Martinez, but also Soft Cell. You know what I mean? Because there was 2 different generations on that road trip. And
I remember where you hated How Deep Is Your Love.
Yeah.
And I like that song.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think I don't know if I'd call this joyful, but one interesting part of writing this was that I felt like I knew what a female midlife crisis looked like, but I wasn't real sure about a male midlife crisis. So I interviewed people. I interviewed like men, 45 to 55, and I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how people see midlife, and people see the aging process differently, depending on what their sort of centers of power were in their youth. And for men and women, that's very different, So that was a really fascinating. It was, it was fun. It was fun. Thank you.
So one last question. Reading this book with so many heavy but powerful themes, it totally caught me by surprise, actually, that there was a happy ending. And you sort of gave us a really satisfying, yet it befits the book type of happy ending. Because if it was, too perfectly tied up in bows, I don't think it would have fit the book. Why did you make this choice of giving the book the type of ending that it did? And was it hard to do?
I think I heard everybody. I think I heard everybody.
Okay.
Yes, I think I heard them all. It was really important to me, thinking about who this book was for, that there was hope at the end of it. I kept thinking, I was haunted by the idea that when I talked to Tamir Rice's mother and this was years later, I couldn't see the end of it for her. But I talked to Shondel's mother, and she had a lot of peace, actually. And so I used that as a guide in writing this, because I feel like, and another thing that happened, so my mother passed away shortly after I turned in the last edits, and I thought, gosh, like I have written myself a manual for how to deal with real actual grief when it showed up, and it wasn't just about moving to California, right? Like I have pre-thought about it, and I think that we hold on to the beautiful things, and there's a lot of oxygen, there's a lot of air, even when things feel like stifling and heavy and smothering. We're constantly grabbing onto the air. So I wanted to do that. And I'll read the last 6 lines because they're not even a spoiler, but I'll finish with that. And that first laugh after each small death was special, a quality of laugh that could be described only with a long German word, a word meaning after the bombs fell, we felt the rich, dark mirth of staying alive long enough to taste the gunpowder in the wind. So, thank you for talking to me.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, we're opening it up for questions.
Jeff.
Here, there you go. She's going to pass the mic. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Michelle, I'm glad you mentioned Jacinda's finely crafted sentences.
Oh, gosh.
Because in reading her first 2 books, I had the sense that she spent months writing these powerful, profound, poetic sentences, and then just kind of found a story to build around them. They were so. But here's my question for you, Jacinda. What possessed you to write a sympathetic male character?
It's actually a good question, because I went into these conversations about midlife thinking, oh yeah, with these guys, like what problems do they really have? And then what kind of blew my mind is that, it's like there's that Coldplay song, and it starts off, I used to rule the world. That is a male midlife crisis song, right? That's not a woman's midlife crisis song. But there's something that just really choked me up about, some of the things people were telling me about, midlife as a man. And actually, there's another character named Anthony.
I know. I wanted to speak up about him because it's impossible to hate him, because even though on paper,
you want to, really badly.
You love him at the same time.
Yeah. Anthony's
so funny.
He's a mess. And yet he's really sad. There's something really kind of sympathetic about what he's going through too. So, yeah. But yeah, I know. Shocker.
Can I tell a detail? Maybe a funny detail. So his mom gives him a book called Attachments, because she wants him to get married, because he's like 48 or something and not married yet. And he reads the first chapter, hates it, drops it off the neighborhood free library, and then at 3 a.m. goes back and gets it, and then secretly is reading it without telling his mother that he's actually reading the book.
He's a mess.
Hilarious. Any other questions?
Yes.
What's one thing you hope people learn or take away, or I don't know, like a call to action? What's one thing you hope people are going to do after reading the book?
One thing is the thing I mentioned earlier about thinking what justice really looks like in the face of police brutality. But another thing is kind of and probably an internal thing, is that I hope that people understand that grief also is very complicated, in the sense that when we grieve, other people around us get kernels of that grief. In this case, this mom has been lying to her own child. I mean, this child knows nothing about this woman, in reality. But I think like we all do it in small ways, and that grief is also a communal activity, no matter how individual the kernel of it is.
It's so great to hear you reading your own work. I love the spirit that you give it. So you talked a little bit about interviewing mothers of some of the folks that you dedicated this book to. Can you talk a little bit more about like how many interviews you did, and did you do those in anticipation of writing this, or did you do it as part of the whole writing process? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So that was kind of an accident. I was interviewing them just for the news article, but I did because I used to be on the core council of Black Lives Matter where I lived, and so I did come in contact with people who were grieving police brutality, and I talked to them. I would say like this book was a little different because usually like I my first book was historical fiction and my second book was set in Morocco. And so I mean that interviewing process was very kind of I was seeking facts. I was seeking details. This one was kind of wild because in a lot of ways everyone I interviewed, I was seeking emotional not explanations, but I was seeking experience, right, that I didn't have. And I always tell my students, I'm like, I don't write what I know because I'm so boring. So I write what I want to know more about. But the paradox is we all kind of know everything because we all know every emotion. And so no, I don't know what that feels like. But I know grief, you know what I mean? So it was just a matter of sort of getting a greater understanding of that particular flavor of it.
And if you want to look up that Al Jazeera article that Jacinda wrote, it pops right up, and definitely worth reading. You know, I have seen news stories about just about every family that she featured, yet not in the way that she wrote about them, you know, and so it was definitely a very worthwhile read. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, thanks for coming out. It's so nice to see everybody. I feel like the last time I saw everyone in this room, the world was so simple. So it's nice to be with you all at this time. Really powerful to see all of you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so thank you all again for coming to the event this evening. Jacinda will be doing some signings as well. You can actually do that, I'd say, wherever you feel most comfortable. If it's easier for you to do it up here, then we can do it that way if you want to be in the back.